Hello, it's Bill Sachs, the interim rector at Emmanuel Episcopal Church in Delaplane, Virginia, with a homily for October 11, 2020. This time of the year reminds me of a gray and rainy day many years ago, somewhat like today, and a Saturday morning when unusually some pieces of mail arrived at our house in the morning. Usually the mailman was quite late. But several pieces arrived, and when I looked at them, I saw one that I knew was very, very important. Our daughter, Sloan, had applied for early decision acceptance to Kenyon College in Gambier, Ohio. We were nervous. It was the only place she had applied and the only place where she seemed interested. So when an envelope arrived that said Kenyon College, well, there was great anxiety. I tried to figure it out. Thin envelopes, I figured, contained rejection letters, but the thicker the envelope, the better. And this one had some thickness to it. Sloan was not yet awake. So we summoned her from her room. She came running downstairs, ripped into the envelope, and yes, she was accepted to Kenyon College. She went there. She had a wonderful 4 years, loved Kenyon, got a great deal out of it. But looking back and listening to subsequent stories of families and parishioners with children applying to college, it's a very, very anxious time. In fact, any time in our lives when we were applying for something that we really want, something on which we really count, it's a very nervous, nail-biting time. We want that invitation so desperately to come. So I thought of the story and the experience Sloan had, which was a warm experience, when I read the gospel lesson for this Sunday, which is Matthew chapter 22. In Matthew chapter 22, a king has a son who's getting married. So the king sends out invitations to all sorts of people. But not only do many people ignore the invitation, some people actually assault the messengers who are bringing the invitation. The king responds angrily. He sends his troops to deal with those who've assaulted his emissaries. And then the king decides, why should I invite all of these people who don't want to be here in the first place? The king sends other emissaries out onto the streets of the city and invites everyone from the streets of the city, not just a select few, but everyone to come. There's a further twist in the story because it seems that one guest comes to the wedding and the king decides that this guest is not properly dressed. And so he has the man thrown into prison, outer darkness, as it is described. It's a very troubling story. Invitations, and particularly invitations to colleges or invitations to prestigious social events, are the kinds of things we want very, very much. But this passage seems to confirm some of the worst images we have about religion. That religion ultimately is judgmental. That religion ultimately is about punishment. That religion ultimately is more exclusive than it is inclusive. But I think there's a different dimension. For one thing, the story is highly symbolic. It is about what Jesus presents as the rejection by so many of the Jewish people of the prophets who had come before him and their rejection of his own message. Jesus himself was a Jew. His followers were Jews. But the religious hierarchy of the day was more interested in its own importance and its own benefits from being part of the Roman Empire. So this is not ultimately about religion being exclusive. It is about religion being inclusive, but Let's go back to the appended story, the added on little story about the man who doesn't wear the proper garment to the wedding. And this is not about social class. What it is about is this. When our daughter Sloane was accepted to Kenyon College, we rejoiced. But that was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. She had to go to Kenyon and work very hard at a good school for 4 years. An invitation is just the beginning. An invitation brings responsibility. The responsibility to work hard, the responsibility to pull our weight, the responsibility to show what we can do in a rigorous, challenging environment. Christianity is not about exclusion, it is about inclusion. But as Christians, we acquire a certain moral responsibility. First, a responsibility to others, to the King who sent the invitation, that is, to God, who created us. To others with whom we socialize, including our families and friends, to whom we acquire certain kinds of responsibilities, especially the responsibility to help someone who's having a difficult time. And we acquire a responsibility to ourselves. To go to a place like Kenyon College or any other excellent, challenging school, to take on a new job or a new position, to take on a new volunteer role, whatever it may be. We are called as Christians to reach for our very best, to give our best, to show that we care. I don't think there's any quality in another person I admire more than to realize that another person truly cares. Cares about the world, cares about the good and the well-being of others, and cares enough to give her best or his best. That's the moral of this story. To care, to accept the invitation, and then to give our best. May God be with us, that we may indeed have the confidence to reach and to give.